AITA for suing my nephew and his mom after he hit on my wife, then framed her? I am 34 years old, and I am here to get all of this off my chest. My wife, Megan, is 32, and we have been married for 3 years. We live in a small town in the Midwest where everyone knows each other, which makes the situation even worse. My brother, Kevin, 38, married Amber, 36, 2 years ago. Amber brought her 16-year-old son, Dylan, from her previous marriage into the family. Kevin also has a 12-year-old daughter, Paige, from his first marriage who lives with us part of the time. Yes, the family structure is complicated, but we have all adapted. Megan and I do not have children yet, but we are trying. She works as a teacher's aide at the local elementary school and is amazing with children. All the kids in our extended family adore her. She is the type of person who remembers everyone's birthday, brings homemade cookies to school events, and always finds time to help with homework. Dylan seemed like a good kid when Amber first introduced him to us. He was polite, a good student, and got along well with Paige. Kevin really tried to be a good stepfather. He took him to local baseball games, helped him with his car when he got his driver's license, and even paid for his driver's education classes when Amber could not afford it. The trouble started about 6 months ago. Dylan began acting strangely around Megan. Once, I caught him staring at her in a way that made me uncomfortable. When I mentioned it to Kevin, he brushed it off, saying it was just teenage hormones and that Dylan just needed to get used to having more family around. Megan had noticed it too, but did not want to create problems in the family. She started to avoid being alone with Dylan and always made sure other people were present when he came over. She never said anything directly, but it was clear she felt uneasy. 3 weeks ago, we had a family cookout at Kevin and Amber's house. Megan was wearing a simple sundress, nothing inappropriate or revealing. She spent most of the day helping Amber in the kitchen and playing board games with Paige. During the cookout, Megan went inside to use the bathroom. Dylan was supposed to be in the garage with Kevin, working on his car. 10 minutes later, Megan came back out, visibly upset. She did not say anything at the time, but I knew something had happened. The next day at work, a colleague took Megan aside. Apparently, Dylan was telling people at school that Megan had tried to make inappropriate advances toward him during the cookout. He claimed she had cornered him in the hallway and made unwanted moves. He even said she had touched him in an improper way. Megan came home that night and told me everything. She was crying and shaking. She told me that Dylan had actually followed her into the house when she went to the bathroom, cornered her in the hallway, and tried to force an unwanted advance. When she pushed him away and told him to stop, he got angry. He told her she had been leading him on with her smiles and kindness. Megan threatened to tell Kevin and Amber everything. Dylan replied that no one would believe her because he was just a kid and she was the adult. He said if she spoke up, he would tell everyone that she had tried something. I was furious. I wanted to go to Kevin's house immediately to confront Dylan, but the damage was already done. The rumor had spread at school, and parents were talking. The principal called Megan into his office the next day. The school board had received complaints from parents who no longer wanted their children around her. The principal was sympathetic and said they would conduct a proper investigation. But in the meantime, Megan was placed on administrative leave. This meant she could not work and was not getting paid. We needed that income to pay the mortgage. I could not stay silent any longer. I called Kevin and told him we needed to talk. I explained what had really happened and what Dylan was saying at school. Kevin did not believe me at first. He said Dylan was a good boy who would never lie about something so serious. Amber was even worse. She completely believed her son's version of events and accused me of defending my wife. She claimed that sometimes older women fixate on teenagers and that maybe Megan could not control herself. It sounded a lot like projection. The conversation turned into an argument. Kevin told me I was being ridiculous and that I needed to accept that maybe my wife had done something wrong. Amber said they were going to press charges against Megan for attempted assault on a minor. I hung up and did not speak to either of them for a week. During that week, more parents complained to the school. Megan's reputation in our small town was being destroyed. People would cross the street to avoid talking to her. The cashier at the local grocery store glared at her, and our neighbors stopped waving. That is when I decided to take action. I called Dylan directly and told him I wanted to see him. He agreed, probably thinking he could convince me of his story. We met at a downtown coffee shop that had security cameras. I told him I knew he was lying and that he had until the end of the week to tell the truth, or I would go to the police myself. I said I would get a lawyer and sue him and his mother for defamation. I told him I would make sure the entire school knew what kind of person he really was. Dylan initially laughed, saying people would believe a kid rather than him. But when I showed him screenshots of messages he had sent to his friends, bragging about how he was going to ruin Megan's life, his attitude changed. I got the screenshots from Paige, who was connected with some of Dylan's classmates on social media. In his messages, Dylan wrote that he was tired of Megan treating him like a child. He also wrote about how easy it would be to make his story stick because she was just a teacher and he was a student. Dylan finally admitted he had made the whole thing up. He said he was angry because Megan had rejected his advance and humiliated him. He thought that if he got her into trouble, she would learn her lesson. He had not realized how serious the consequences would be. I recorded our conversation on my phone. When Dylan realized what I had done, he begged me not to say anything. He said his mother would be furious and that Kevin would never forgive him. I took the recording straight to the principal and the police. The principal immediately reinstated Megan and sent letters to all the parents explaining that the accusations had been proven false. The police said they could press charges against Dylan for making a false report, but it would be up to Megan to decide if she wanted to move forward. Kevin called me that night, furious. Amber had told him about my meeting with Dylan, but she claimed I had threatened and intimidated her son. He said Dylan had only confessed to lying because he was afraid of what I might do to him. I played the recording for Kevin over the phone. He finally said he needed time to think and hung up. The next day, Amber showed up at our house with Dylan. She demanded that I delete the recording and stop spreading lies about her son. She claimed Dylan was confused and scared and that his original story was the truth. Dylan stood behind his mother the whole time without saying a word. He did not even look at Megan or me. When I played the recording again, Amber said I had manipulated and coerced her son into saying those things. Megan finally spoke up and told Amber to leave our property immediately. She added that if she came back, we would call the police. Amber insulted Megan and said this was not over. Since then, Kevin has not spoken to me. Paige calls sometimes, but she has to do it in secret because Amber does not want her contacting us. The whole family has split, with some believing Dylan's original story and others believing the truth. Megan went back to work, but it is not the same. Some parents still look at her with suspicion, and a few have asked to have their children transferred to another class. The principal supports her, but Megan knows her reputation will never be fully restored in this small town. We are considering moving and starting over somewhere else. Megan has started applying for jobs far away from here. I am looking for work too, because I know my relationship with Kevin will never be the same. The worst part is that Dylan shows no remorse. He continues to claim he is the victim, even though his own recorded confession proves otherwise. Amber continues to defend him, telling people I forced him to lie through threats and intimidation. I do not know what the right decision is anymore. Part of me wants to sue Dylan so he faces the consequences. Another part just wants to move and forget all of this. Whatever happens, it is Megan's decision, and I will support whatever she chooses. In any case, I know my family will never be the same again. Update 1. The situation with Dylan has completely escalated, and now legal issues are involved. A few days after my first post, Megan and I decided to press charges against Dylan for making a false report and for defamation. We hired a lawyer who specializes in these kinds of cases. He was thrilled to take the case because the evidence was overwhelmingly in our favor. The police arrested Dylan at school the following week. It caused a huge scandal, as Amber showed up screaming at the officers, claiming they were arresting an innocent child. Dozens of students and teachers witnessed the scene, so the news spread quickly through town. This also helped our case. Amber hired her own lawyer and filed a countersuit against us for harassment and intimidation of a minor. She claimed I had harassed and threatened Dylan to force him to confess to things he did not commit. Her lawyer argued that the recording was obtained illegally and could not be used as evidence. Our lawyer said this was a common defense tactic and not to worry. The recording was legal because I was a party to the conversation and we were in a public place. The text messages were also legitimate evidence because Paige had accessed them normally through social media. But the legal drama was just the beginning. Amber launched a campaign to turn the whole town against us. She created a social media group called Let's Protect Our Children, where she posted messages explaining that adults were using their power to silence victims of abuse. She never mentioned Dylan by name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. The group gathered hundreds of members in a few days. People started sharing stories, saying they had always found something off about Megan. Some even made up entire stories of inappropriate behavior they had supposedly seen. The lies got bigger and more extravagant every day. That is the worst part. No one has any real stories to tell about Megan. But people love to belong to these kinds of groups and will write anything. Someone spray-painted the word predator on our garage door. The tires on our car were slashed twice in 1 week. Megan found threatening notes in her locker at school. The principal had to assign her a security guard to escort her between classes because parents were coming to the school demanding she be fired. Kevin finally called me after the arrest. He said he believed Dylan's confession was real, but that he could not take a side because it would destroy his marriage. He said Amber was convinced I had manipulated everything and that Dylan was too scared to tell the real truth. Kevin asked me to drop the charges and move away quietly. I told him there was no way I was dropping it. Dylan had to face the consequences of his actions, and other potential victims needed to know that false accusations have serious repercussions. Kevin said he understood, but that he could not support us publicly because of Amber. That conversation hurt me more than I thought it would. We had been close our whole lives, and now he was choosing his wife's son over his own brother. He said he was caught in an impossible situation, but from my perspective, he was taking the easy, cowardly way out. Paige called me in tears the next day. She said Amber had forbidden her from speaking to us and that students at school were asking her if Megan had ever behaved inappropriately with her. Paige told us all of this because Megan had always been kind to her, but Amber was saying horrible things about both of us. She also said her dad looked sad all the time and that there were constant arguments at home. The worst incident happened last weekend. Megan and I went to the local grocery store together because she was afraid to go alone. A group of women recognized her in the produce aisle and started following us through the store, making loud comments about her being unsafe around children and saying that some people should not be near minors. One of them got close enough to whisper a serious threat to her. Another woman knocked items out of Megan's hands and deliberately stepped on her foot. The store manager had to escort us out the back for our safety. After that, Megan stopped eating regularly. She would sit at the table, staring at her food without taking a bite. She stopped showering daily and started wearing the same clothes for several days. She would wake up in the middle of the night crying, believing she could hear people around the house. Our lawyer advised us to document everything for the case. He said the harassment we were enduring strengthened our position because it showed the real-world consequences of Dylan's false accusations. But documenting every threat and incident meant reliving the trauma over and over. So that task fell to me. The preliminary hearing was scheduled soon, but not soon enough. Dylan's lawyer filed several motions to delay the case, claiming they needed more time to prepare the defense. Our lawyer said this was another common tactic to drag things out and wear us down emotionally and financially. Amber's social media campaign was working. Local businesses started refusing to serve us. The mechanic I had used for years told me to go elsewhere. The restaurant where Megan and I had our first date asked us to leave when we tried to have dinner there. Even some of our former friends began to avoid us. People we had known for years would cross the street when they saw us. Megan's old colleagues no longer answered her calls. It felt like the entire town had turned against us because of the lies of a teenager and his vindictive mother. I started seriously looking for work in other states. Megan agreed that moving was probably our only option to start fresh, but she worried about leaving before the case was resolved. She said people might think we were guilty if we left before Dylan's hearing. Our lawyer said we could pursue the case from anywhere and that our safety was more important than public perception. He said that small towns could be particularly cruel with these kinds of accusations, and staying could put us in physical danger. The stress was affecting us both physically. I started having daily headaches and was only sleeping a few hours a night. Megan developed a nervous twitch and would scratch her arms raw from the anxiety. We both lost weight because we were too anxious to eat properly. Last week, we decided to accept job offers elsewhere and move by next month. Megan found a position at a private school that agreed to hire her despite the controversy. I found a job with a company that did not require local references. We are selling our house and cutting all ties with this place. Kevin sent me a message when he heard we were moving. He said he was sorry things had gone so far and that he wished there was another way. But he also said he understood why we had to leave and hoped that one day we could rebuild our relationship when things had calmed down. No matter how much they calm down, our relationship will never be repaired. There is nothing to forgive. The damage to our family is too great. Kevin chose Amber and Dylan over us, and that choice is not something I can forgive. Paige is the only one I truly feel sorry for in this whole story because she is an innocent child caught in the middle of adult problems. Update 2. We have been in our new city for 3 weeks, and I thought the worst was behind us. Things back home have gotten even more complicated. Our lawyer called last week with news about the case. Dylan had a scheduled court hearing but did not show up. Amber told the court that Dylan was too traumatized by our actions to testify and that forcing him to appear would cause him psychological damage. More shady tactics. The judge was not impressed. He issued a bench warrant for Dylan and set a new hearing for the following month. Our lawyer said this worked in our favor, as Dylan's absence made him look guilty and unstable. Paige called me, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. She said that Amber blamed Kevin for not protecting Dylan from the justice system, and that their arguments had become so intense that she and her father had moved out. Dylan had sent threatening messages to Paige because their father was not cooperating. Dylan had also left home. He had run away. Paige said she heard Dylan on the phone with someone the night before he ran away. He was saying he could not handle the pressure anymore and had to get away before the hearing ruined his life. She thinks he might have been talking to his biological father, who lives in another state. Amber was convinced that Dylan's disappearance was our fault. She posted on social media that we had driven an innocent boy to run away from home. She claimed Dylan was so afraid of facing us in court that running away was his only option. The police treated Dylan's disappearance as a voluntary runaway case, not a kidnapping, because he is 16 and left of his own free will. They issued an alert but said that unless they had evidence of a crime, there was not much to do but wait for him to make contact. Kevin called me for the first time since we moved. He said Amber was blaming him for everything and that their marriage was falling apart. Kevin asked if I would consider dropping the lawsuit if Dylan was found and agreed to go to therapy. Maybe there was a way to resolve all of this without destroying more lives. I told him to never call me again and that the only life that mattered to me now was my wife's, which had been destroyed by his stepson. As far as I know, my brother is planning to divorce Amber. Too little, too late, but whatever. 3 days after that conversation, the police found Dylan. He was living with his biological father in another state, who said he was unaware of the legal troubles when Dylan showed up. The father agreed to send Dylan back to face the charges, but said he wanted to be involved in all proceedings as Dylan's parent. Amber was furious that Dylan's biological father was getting involved. She had always claimed he was an irresponsible man who had abandoned Dylan as a child. But Dylan's father said he had been paying child support for years and that Amber had prevented him from having a relationship with his son. Dylan's father seemed ready to hold his son accountable for his actions. Unlike Amber, who had always defended and covered for him. The father had already agreed to bring Dylan back for the hearing and cooperate with the court, but Amber was not ready to give up. She filed an emergency motion claiming that Dylan's father had no legal right to make decisions about the case because she had sole custody. She also argued that our lawsuit had driven Dylan to such despair that sending him back to face the charges was equivalent to abuse. The family court judge denied Amber's motion and ruled that Dylan's father had every right to participate in his son's legal defense. The judge also noted that Dylan was old enough to understand the consequences of his actions and that running away from a legal process was not an acceptable response to avoid being held accountable. Meanwhile, Kevin was facing his own legal problems. Amber had filed to become Paige's legal guardian, claiming Kevin was an unfit father because he had failed to protect Dylan from harassment. She was using our case as evidence that Kevin could not protect children from unsafe situations. Paige called me again, saying she never wanted to see Amber or Dylan again. She said Amber was saying horrible things about Kevin and us. Kevin's lawyer thinks Amber does not stand a chance. The strangest part of all this is that Dylan's return to town created new problems for Amber's narrative. Several of Dylan's former friends came forward with information about his behavior, contradicting the image of an innocent victim. One classmate told the police that Dylan had tried to convince her to lie about their math teacher. Another student said Dylan had spread rumors about a classmate he wanted to ruin. Amber's reaction to these new revelations was predictable. She claimed that all of Dylan's former friends were lying because they had been influenced by our legal campaign against him. But the evidence is overwhelming. Dylan's messages, his recorded confession, his history of false accusations, and his attempt to flee to avoid legal consequences completely discredit him. Our lawyer scheduled a settlement conference for next month, hoping to resolve the case without a lengthy trial. He said that Dylan's father seemed willing to take responsibility for his son's actions and work out a deal that would include reimbursing our legal fees, a compensatory sum, and a public apology to clear Megan's name. Megan and I are cautiously optimistic about finally closing this nightmarish chapter. That said, we will never go back, and it is unlikely my relationship with my brother will ever be repaired. Update 3. The legal case is finally over, and here is an update. The resolution was not exactly what we expected, but we got the essentials of what we were fighting for. Dylan returned to face the charges, accompanied by his biological father. The father turned out to be very different from what Amber had described. He was a responsible man who had been trying to maintain a relationship with Dylan for years, despite Amber's interference. He was horrified to learn what Dylan had done and made it clear there would be consequences. The settlement conference went better than our lawyer had anticipated. Dylan's father insisted that his son take full responsibility for his actions. Dylan admitted in court that he had completely fabricated the story about Megan and that his accusations were entirely false. He also admitted to lying to the police and spreading false information on social media. As part of the settlement, Amber and the father had to pay damages for our legal fees, our moving expenses, and an additional compensatory sum. The amount was substantial, even though money cannot fix everything. Amber also had to pay a significant sum for her own defamatory acts. Dylan was required to write a formal letter of apology, which was published in the local newspaper and on the school district's website. In this letter, he acknowledged making false accusations against Megan and stated that she was completely innocent. The public apology was essential to clear Megan's name for anyone who might still have doubts. The criminal charges were reduced to community service and probation instead of more severe penalties, partly because Dylan is still a minor and because his father guaranteed he would receive therapy and supervision. Dylan must complete 200 hours of community service and remain on probation for 2 years. Amber was furious with the settlement and tried to file several appeals, but her lawyer eventually advised her to accept the decision. She obviously did not get legal guardianship of Paige. Paige is doing much better now. She calls regularly and has even visited us twice. The most satisfying part of the resolution was seeing Amber's social media campaign backfire on her. Once the truth was officially made public, many of the people who had supported her Let's Protect Our Children group felt they had been manipulated. Several parents posted apologies for believing the lies and expressed their support for Megan. Some of the business owners who refused to serve us also apologized, but the damage was already done. We have no intention of returning to a place where so many people were willing to believe the worst of us without any proof. This experience showed us who our real friends were, and there were not many. Megan is doing much better now. Her new job at the private school has been a real fresh start, and her colleagues are very supportive. She still has some anxiety about being falsely accused, but she is getting professional help. My relationship with my brother is completely destroyed, even though he left Amber. At least he has not stopped his daughter from having a relationship with us. The divorce between Kevin and Amber was finalized last month, with Amber being Amber to the very end. Amber now lives alone because she lost custody of her son. Dylan lives full-time with his father and attends a different school. His father has enrolled him in therapy and has him working an after-school job to teach him the value of honest work. The most important outcome is that Megan's name has been officially and publicly cleared. Anyone who looks into the case will find court documents showing that Dylan admitted to lying and that Megan was completely innocent. This documentation will protect Megan's career and reputation in the future. We have decided to stay here permanently. We both have good jobs, and the community has welcomed us. Megan loves her new school, and I have been promoted twice since we moved. We are buying a house here and making plans for the future. Paige will be visiting us next month for her spring break. Update 4. This is a final and happier update than anything I have written recently. My wife and I are doing better. We feel fully settled in this new city, which is a huge plus. We no longer feel like newcomers. We are now part of the place, our jobs, and our social circles. Paige is doing well. One thing to appreciate about my brother, despite our differences, is that he does not stop her from visiting us. He could be petty and prevent it, but he seems to understand that what he did was wrong, or he just does not want to punish his daughter. We also know that Dylan's father is recouping some of the money he lost due to the lawsuit through Dylan's work. Not because he is taking the money from him, but because Dylan has chosen to take responsibility to make amends. Amber does not see it that way and even sued her ex-husband, claiming it was inappropriate. That lawsuit lasted even less time than Amber was being reasonable. Amber has also left town, but unlike us, who received compensation to do so under the court's decision, she received nothing. In fact, it is almost a form of compensation for us that she had to pay for the damage caused by Dylan and by her own stubbornness in making everything worse. Comment: I wanted to share this with you because it really hits home how much self-respect matters in our daily lives. You deserve to have your boundaries respected, no matter who is involved. Kindness should never come at the cost of your own peace of mind. Taking responsibility for our choices helps us build healthier relationships with the people around us. I believe true healing begins the moment we decide to choose calm over chaos. You have the strength to walk away from anything that drains you and start fresh. Take a quiet moment to think about the lines you draw in your own life. I hope this story leaves you feeling inspired to protect what matters most to you. We are all capable of growing and becoming better every single day. Thanks for being here with me as we reflect on these important lessons. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.